It's a day that ends in Y, which means there is naturally chaos in the NBA. Steve Nash, outski in Brooklyn as a team that's in the Eastern Conference. That does relate to the Milwaukee Bucks. So I want to talk about the continuity of this Milwaukee Bucks team. We also got an update on Khris Middleton. When is he going to return to this team? And what about Bobby Portis, sixth man of the year? We haven't discussed it for a while, but he's had a massive start to the season. Let's talk about all that today on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also find my work over at ESPN. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. And naturally, as I do every day, I want to thank you all for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every day. We are rolling in the 2022-23 NBA season. Subscriptions are going through the roof. I told you, I never used to do this. That probably a bad host. But if you haven't subscribed or followed on your audio platform or specifically on YouTube, we're trying to get the subscriptions there, and they are going up at a rate of knots. We're on the road to 5K subscriptions. I want to get there by, let's say, Thanksgiving, a couple of weeks. So it shouldn't be too far away. But the conversation is great. People are jumping on YouTube. You can get involved. I'm putting polls up there on the YouTube page. So there's plenty of stuff to get interactive with there. And basically, I'm asking you guys, what do you want on the show? Are there guests that I could potentially bring on? So it's all about the listeners telling me what they want for this show. I mentioned there's chaos in the NBA. That's not exactly a huge shock. We see chaos all the time in this league. Steve Nash is gone. Maybe not a huge surprise. I think there was certainly some people that saw this coming over the last week or so, perhaps all the way back to the offseason when it was suggested that maybe some of the players didn't want Steve Nash to be head coach. Wild situation. If Frank Madden ever wants me not on this podcast, he just needs to tell me, and I'll walk. I'm not going to hang on. So Frank, if you're listening, if you want me gone, you just say the word. We did get an update on Khris Middleton today, though, and this is noteworthy because we don't always get the frequent injury updates with Bucks players that have health concerns. And I woke up over here in Australia, and you see the tweet, Khris Middleton and MarJon Beauchamp have been assigned to the Wisconsin Herd. This is something that we've seen certainly become more prominent as years have gone on, as the last few years have gone on. We've seen that teams have been able to use their affiliate to get guys practice. So this was purely for practice. Khris Middleton and MarJon Beauchamp just going to the Wisconsin Herd for a practice. So it can be easily confused. You see Middleton going to the Herd, you might think that he's going to play, but no, this is just a gap in the schedule for the Bucks to be able to get Khris Middleton some practice time. Sometimes I think it's not known, and I mean, obviously it's not known if you're not there at practice. And I've been fortunate enough for a couple of seasons prior to the pandemic when I was living in Milwaukee to go to Bucks practice every time they were there. But the one thing that you learn, and the one thing that I certainly learned, is how little these guys practice in the middle of an NBA schedule, 82 games on the road all the time. So the Bucks didn't practice today. They didn't have to show up to the facility. Tomorrow before the game, there's going to be no shoot around. And this is just life in the NBA regular season. These guys rarely get to practice because they want to take as much time as they can to rest, to recuperate, and keep their bodies in good shape. But if you're Khris Middleton and you're trying to get back, and remember, it was only a couple of weeks ago where Khris was on the broadcast of a game, ESPN, I think it was the season opener, and he said, yeah, I only just started taking shots today. I only just started ball handling drills. So he is really in the early stages of getting back. I think that this is a good sign, though, because if they're sending him to the Herd to practice, I assume, and this is just an assumption, but I assume that they're not sending him to the G League team, to Oshkosh, to just get up shots in an empty gym, because he would just do that in Milwaukee. So this might be an indication that he is starting to progress into contact drills, which means that his return is close. Now, I had a YouTube subscriber, I hope a subscriber, ask me the other day, what's the update on Middleton? And I said, well, I've just been piecing together the breadcrumbs, which we know are sometimes few and far between. And originally, even going back to the preseason, I kind of thought that middle of November seemed about right based on what we were hearing. Now, that's coming up really quickly. But if he is progressing to the idea where he can do contact stuff, perhaps scrimmage a little bit, whether it's 1-on-1, 3-on-3, 5-on-5, maybe, 2 weeks-ish doesn't seem totally unrealistic. I certainly understand and acknowledge that they're not going to rush Khris Middleton back to this team. But I think this is a great development and an exciting one. The Bucks need Khris Middleton back in the lineup. Of course, they are 6-0, but as I'm about to get into here, the offensive numbers have not been pretty for this team. The other player, Marjon Beauchamp, gets down. He gets some practice in. So I know there's been some level of frustration that he hasn't been able to get the minutes that some Bucks fans would have loved to have seen from him over this last little period with so many guys out of the lineup. Jordan Nwora has been the guy that's been soaking up the bulk of the minutes on the wing. As we've discussed on this show, I don't think to this point Jordan Nwora has done anything to really lock down future opportunities. But for now, he's ahead of Marjon Beauchamp. So we'll see whether anything opens up as the season goes on. Marjon hasn't really had the opportunity in a game to do anything special of late. He hit that 3 a couple of nights ago against Atlanta. But I think I understand. Everyone's excited to see him play. But I think there also is and was a realistic expectation entering these first weeks of the season that he was probably going to start behind Jordan Nwora. We don't know what the future is of Jordan Nwora in Milwaukee. We know it took a long time for him to sign that contract entering into the season and take that final roster spot. So we'll see what the future holds there. But for now, at least, I was pumped to see Khris Middleton assigned to the Wisconsin Herd, and probably still a few weeks away, but nonetheless, it's exciting. But I want to get into the offensive numbers because you know that the Bucks need Khris Middleton, particularly in the half court, and some of the numbers are straight up ugly right now. And then I want to talk about the continuity of the Bucks and why they're playing so well, and then Bobby Portis, 6th man of the year. So we've got plenty to get to on this show, but first I want to talk about Bet Online, which is your number one source for betting on basketball, football, and everything else sports related here. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for sports wagering information, including NBA championship odds. I got these sent through to me today. So as far as what I'm looking at here at betonline.net, the Milwaukee Bucks are now your NBA championship favorites. They're just ahead of the Boston Celtics, Golden State Warriors, and then there's a bit of a dip to the Los Angeles Clippers there. The Phoenix Suns are a team that's come in 14-1 at the start of the season. They're into 10-1. They've obviously had an impressive start out there in Phoenix. But the Bucks, as expected, they haven't stepped a foot wrong so far this season and continue to win. And we hope the winning streak will continue to roll on. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, don't forget to check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast as well. Once you're done with Locked On Bucks, and of course, Locked On Bucks is your first listen of every single day, but once you're done, Locked On Sports Today has you covered with everything else going on around the sporting world, and I imagine they will be talking about the Brooklyn Nets on today's show. So you wonder, with the Bucks 6-0, where is the significant room for improvement? It's clearly on the offensive end at this point in time. They are missing their best perimeter player, their best perimeter scorer, multi-time All-Star Khris Middleton. So currently the Bucks have the number one ranked defense in the league. We've discussed it a lot, particularly with the way that they're guarding the three-point shot. But on offense, it has been a little bit of a battle. They rank 17th currently with an offensive rating of 112.5. That's low for the Bucks. Even in previous years, when maybe they haven't fired on all cylinders, that is a low number for Milwaukee. Now, it is only early in the season. The numbers can bounce around significantly if you have one or two good nights in a row. So it's not total panic stations, but it is worth noting. We saw last year in the postseason, and I've been pretty vocal about it, there's been big-time discussions about the way that the Bucks defended the Boston Celtics. And perhaps what happened with Grant Williams in Game 7 was a big reason, or part of the reason why the Bucks have decided to tweak the three-point defense. I'm not going to deny that. That would make perfect sense to me. But ultimately, that was a series where what they did on the defensive end and the numbers that they held Boston to across the course of the series, it was a 97 defensive rating. You would like to think that you can win. And Giannis did it all, as we know. He was absolutely unbelievable across that entire series, but they weren't able to hit threes. And ultimately, they weren't able to create and generate offense in the half court. Now, that has carried through to this season. And I've been someone that sat back and said, well, if you had Khris Middleton, you probably win that series. I don't think that you can realistically expect Milwaukee to beat true contenders in the Eastern Conference if Jrue Holiday's missing. I feel the same way about Khris Middleton. Brook Lopez would be an unbelievable mountain to climb as well. They might not be able to beat contenders without Brook Lopez. Hey, it's a big shock to everyone. If you don't have your best players, if you're not healthy towards the back end of the season, it's going to be hard to win a title. I know. I'm not breaking any type of news here. But to start the season in the half court, Milwaukee are putting up 94.3 points per 100 possessions. These numbers via cleaning the glass. That's 20th in the league. It's down from last year. Across the entire regular season last year, they were at about 99 points per 100 possessions, which still isn't great. So it's not like Milwaukee is a half-court juggernaut regardless. But if you take out Khris Middleton, the best shooter on the team, the guy, really the only guy that can create his own shot, Giannis creates his own shots in his own way. But I'm talking straight up isolation, perimeter, attack a switch, attack a big man, back to the basket, mid-range shooting. Khris Middleton's the guy on this team. As we've seen over the last couple of years, Jrue Holiday has been remarkably consistent with his step-back jump shots during the regular season. But from time to time, he can be a little bit streaky, which is fine. He brings so much more to the table elsewhere. But the Bucks are missing Khris Middleton offensively. So it won't be a surprise to anyone that the Bucks are shooting 70.8% at the rim. That's number one in the league. So the Bucks are still able to get into the paint. Obviously, Giannis is a humongous part of that. Also, the gravity that Giannis creates when he has the ball in hand. The dunker spot has been an area where the Bucks have been able to exploit the opposition. Frank and Eric, hashtag dunker spot George Hill. But Brook Lopez has been doing work down there. Jrue Holiday generally gets to his spot, even though he struggled a little bit to finish. But ultimately, the Bucks are still a team that can score at the rim. And they have been consistently for a number of years. In the mid-range, they're shooting 33.1%, which ranks 29th across the league. And from the three-point line, they're shooting 33.5%, which is 26th from the league. So anytime they get stuck in the half court right now, so far this season, they've been a bottom third team. So even though they're 6-0, they've done that despite the fact that the offense is not clicking. I think that Khris Middleton's going to help that. People will point to coaching and they'll say, well, the Bucks aren't running any offense. I would push back on that. I think we've seen some interesting stuff. We've seen the Bucks try and use Grayson Allen and Bobby Portis in pick and rolls. We've seen Bobby Portis having more touches in different areas. And sometimes they've just said, hey, Bobby, we just need a bucket. Giannis is missing his favorite pick and roll partner in Khris Middleton, which not only creates offense for Giannis, but it creates a ton of open threes. Albeit the Bucks haven't been able to knock them down yet. So I think that, moving forward, there is obviously going to be still a question mark over the overall outside shooting of this team. You bring back Khris Middleton, you bring back Pat Connaughton. Hopefully at some point you bring in Joe Ingles as well. You feel like that helps. But I don't think that there's any Bucks fans out there that are going to enter this year's postseason and feel 100% confident that all of a sudden the shots are going to be knocked down, because historically we haven't seen it. So I think this Bucks team is great. I think this Bucks team has every right to be the NBA title favorite right now. I think they're going to be there at the pointy end of the season, health pending. But yeah, the offense is going to continue to be a question mark because it has been for a number of years. So we will see. But as I pointed at the top, we hope Khris Middleton is back here pretty soon. But the idea of continuity for this Bucks team is interesting, because as I've thought about it the last few days, and we discussed this a lot, And credit to our listeners, by the way. There was a lot of our listeners that said, "Yeah, I think you guys are pessimistic. You're talking down the Bucks' chances." We did an over and under pod for those that missed it prior to the season. I took the over on wins. I said the Bucks are going to get at least 53 wins this season. So I don't think the overall vibe was pessimistic about what this team could achieve. But I was concerned, basically because of the numbers I've just read out offensively, that this team was going to have a slow start to the season because I thought they were going to struggle to figure it out on the offensive end. Now, technically, they kind of have. But I did not bank on Brook Lopez being an absolute beast night in and night out on the defensive end. I didn't know how he was going to look based on what we saw last year with the back surgery. That's a significant procedure for a 7-footer entering his mid-30s. So I couldn't have predicted that he was going to look as great as he has. And I think that, as much as anything, has been a significant reason why the Bucks are 6-0. But the other part is, you look around the other teams in the league, and basically every contender is working in new pieces. Maybe they have a new coach. They're working through the ups and downs that a lot of teams have early in the season. And the Bucks have had a home-heavy schedule, so that's worth noting as well. But I think that a big reason why their defense has been able to work flawlessly, basically, to start the season, even implementing a new idea of protecting the three-point line, is because these guys just know how to play each other. So when John Horst denied at the start of the season that, the Bucks didn't just run it back, I laughed about that because of course they ran it back. They brought back literally the exact same roster and added Joe Ingles, who isn't going to play for months. But the idea that running it back is a bad thing is false. It doesn't have to be bad. For this Bucks team, they won a championship 2 years ago. Last year, they learned some lessons, and they've tweaked things this year. They're not just coming back this season and saying, well, we've got the same guys. We won the title a couple of years ago, so we'll be fine. Let's just cross our fingers and hope everyone's healthy. They've looked at what's happened in previous seasons. They've made tweaks. They've made adjustments. And remember, the last time that they made major adjustments was the 2021 regular season when they were up and down defensively all year long, and it worked at the time when it really matters and they won a title. But I think it's easier to make adjustments and make tweaks when you've got Drew Holiday, Khris Middleton, Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, George Hill, Wesley Matthews, all these guys that have played major minutes together over a number of seasons. You just figure it out quicker than the opposition generally does early in the season. So I just wanted to acknowledge something that I overlooked in the preseason, that this team, they know how to play together. They've won a lot of games together. They've been in every situation you can possibly imagine together. And I think that we're seeing that early in the season. Yeah, the challenge will be when teams say, okay, this is what the Bucks are doing defensively. We haven't seen this in the last 4 years under a Mike Budenholzer defense. And they'll start to figure things out on their own end, whether it's new players, new systems. Teams will start to separate. The contenders will start to reveal themselves over the next 20 to 25 games. The Bucks will be on the road, as we've discussed. At the moment, they're taking advantage of a schedule that's been pretty friendly. But they've done that through some adversity with players missing on this team. So you can only sit back and applaud what the Bucks have done so far this season to start 6-0, and it puts them in a really good position to launch into the season as they start to integrate other players onto the roster. But hey, familiarity with this team certainly appears to help. And by the way, having a superstar like Giannis also is pretty damn important. All right, I want to talk about Bobby Portis, 6th man of the year next, and also what is going on in Brooklyn. All right, so we'll start with the Nets. Steve Nash out in Brooklyn. I don't think this is a huge surprise. We've discussed the Brooklyn Nets on this podcast a lot because they are, on paper, a team that should be contending against the Bucks with the personnel they have on paper. But we understand there are some complexities with this team. Kevin Durant wanted to trade out of there. Ben Simmons hasn't played for over a year, and quite frankly, just does not look healthy. There was turmoil with Steve Nash over the offseason. Was he even going to return to this team? And then the Kyrie Irving situation. Is he going to play? What's he going to say next? That's been a never-ending saga. And quite frankly, seems like a pretty difficult situation to be a part of if you're the team trying to roll through here. The Nets continue to be a fascinating watch for me. If Ime Udoka comes in and takes the reins, it's a bit of a hard-ass coach. I think we've seen that from his time in Boston. There was conflict early. Are the personalities in this Brooklyn locker room going to be able to withstand that? I'm not 100% sure. But the Nets just continue to be a watch. And that's why the Bucks are the no-fuss team of this league. That's why they are an easy team to bet on to be a contender year in and year out, because the personalities are so easy. Everyone gets along. They've played together for a number of years. And maybe they don't produce any drama, which seems to be what the NBA thrives on. But I can tell you, as someone that watches this team and just loves the game of basketball, it's a delight to watch this team play together. And it's also a delight to watch Bobby Portis play basketball. So something that we've seen a number of times, people say, can Bobby Portis win Sixth Man of the Year? It's difficult on a team like Milwaukee because your starters do the bulk of the heavy lifting when it comes to the offense. In fact, the Bucks have been a pretty low-scoring second-unit team historically, but Bobby last year came into the starting lineup, replaced Brook Lopez, and was pretty much a walking double-double. Now, he's gone back to the bench this year, but nothing has changed. This man is a walking double-double. He's only playing 24 minutes per game so far, but he's putting up 13.3 points and 10.5 rebounds. So his production is absolutely through the roof. If you want to go to per 36 numbers right there, he's putting up 19 points and 15 rebounds per game, which had me thinking, if he goes through, the Bucks are the number one seed. They have a fantastic season. Could Bobby Portis actually be Sixth Man of the Year for this team? So the only person I could compare it to, because we have seen Sixth Man of the Year over the years. I can't even remember who won it last year. But, I think of guys like Jamal Crawford, Lou Williams, these really microwave scorers. So you're like, okay, well, if you're a guy coming off the bench, can you average 18, 20 points per game? You don't see too many big men winning this award, but Montrezl Harrell is one guy that I thought of. So this was in the 2019-20 season. He was with the Clippers. He put up 18 points and 7 rebounds, but he played far more minutes. I mean, he was playing 28 to 29 minutes per game. So on a per 36 basis, Montrezl is doing a little bit more scoring, but Bobby's doing almost double the rebounding. And if you are on a team that finishes in the number one seed, where is the balance between looking at the raw numbers and then looking at the success of the team and roll with the team? So I would say at this point, it's still a long shot that Bobby Portis can win Sixth Man of the Year, because I think elsewhere you'll see players like a Jordan Poole potentially average 22, 23 points per game off the bench with Golden State. But even if Bobby Portis doesn't win Sixth Man of the Year officially, he's the Sixth Man of the Year in our hearts. Let's be honest. Bobby Portis, we all love him, and he's had an incredible start to the season. I put up a poll on the community section on the YouTube channel, which is just another reason why you need to subscribe to YouTube. And I asked the question and said, which player, has been the most important non-Buck so far this year? I had Brook Lopez in there. I had obviously Drew Holiday, and I had Bobby Portis, and Wesley Matthews in there. He had a game winner. I knew he wasn't going to get a lot of votes, but shout out to Wes. Brook Lopez won this poll by a mile, but there was some love for Bobby out there, because I think that what he's doing for this team can be easily overlooked. But as I've mentioned, this team is struggling offensively, and Bobby is a bucket, as we absolutely know. So, all right, plenty to get through on today's show. The Khris Middleton update, probably number one for me in terms of things that we need to look at moving forward, things we need to worry about. But the Bucks are back at it tomorrow. You guessed it, the Detroit Pistons. Let's see if they can move to 7-0. This would match their winning streak to start the season in 2018-19. Milwaukee, Detroit, 7 p.m. Central Time, Fiserv Forum. The homestand continues. Make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, I should say, for all your sports news across the world. After you're done with Locked On Bucks, subscribe to YouTube, continue to support us, and continue to tell us what you want on this show. We'll be back after Bucks and Pistons tomorrow, hopefully with the winning streak still intact. We'll speak to you guys